the forgotten valley. The wind whispered secrets through the tall grass as Lyra carefully traced the worn edges of the ancient map in her hands. The parchment felt fragile, as though it had been waiting centuries to be found. And now, it pulsed with a quiet, almost imperceptible energy. She had discovered it buried deep within the attic of her late grandmother's house, tucked away in a leather-bound journal filled with stories of far-off places and magical realms. Among the pages of faded ink and yellowed paper, the map had stood out, a promise of something beyond the ordinary. Lyra's life had been anything but extraordinary. A small-town girl with big dreams, she had once been full of hope and ambition, her heart set on becoming an artist. But as the years passed, the harsh realities of life chipped away at her resolve. The vibrant colors she once saw in the world had dulled, her once steady hands now hesitant and unsure. The canvas that once brought her joy now stood abandoned in a corner of her tiny apartment, gathering dust like the remnants of her dreams. But the map had changed everything. It depicted a valley nestled between towering mountains, where rivers of light flowed and lanterns floated like stars in the night sky. There was no name on the map, only a cryptic inscription in an ancient script that Lyra couldn't decipher. Yet, something deep within her stirred as she looked at it, a whisper from her soul that urged her to follow its path. The Valley of the Lanterns, she murmured to herself, the name forming unbidden on her lips. And so, she had set out on a journey that would take her far from the life she knew, leaving behind the familiar in search of something she couldn't quite name. The road was long and winding, leading her through dense forests and across barren plains. But with each step, she felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Days turned into weeks, and the world around her began to change. The air grew thick with the scent of jasmine, and the nights were no longer dark but filled with a soft, glowing light. The map led her unerringly forward, its lines and symbols guiding her to a place she had never imagined but had somehow always known existed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she stood at the edge of the valley. It was just as the map had shown, a place of unparalleled beauty, where the earth and sky seemed to merge in a dance of light and shadow. Lanterns of every shape and size floated gently above the ground, their warm glow casting a serene light over the landscape. Rivers of liquid light wound their way through the valley, reflecting the lanterns in their depths like a mirror to the heavens. Lyra took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the place she had been searching for, the place that held the answers she sought. But as she stepped forward, a voice called out to her, stopping her in her tracks. "Who enters the Valley of the Lanterns?" the voice asked, deep and resonant, seeming to come from all around her. Lyra looked around, her eyes wide as she searched for the source of the voice. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing, draped in robes that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. His face was obscured by a hood, but his presence was undeniable. A guardian of the valley, a keeper of its secrets. I am Lyra," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I seek the truth that lies within this valley." The figure regarded her for a moment before nodding slowly. "The truth is not always what we wish it to be, seeker. Many have come to this valley in search of their heart's desire, but few have left with what they sought." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine, but she stood her ground. "I have come this far. I must know what this valley holds for me." The guardian studied her for a long moment, his eyes, though hidden, seeming to pierce into her very soul. Finally, he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter the valley. "Then enter, Lyra, and may the light of the lanterns guide you to your truth." With a deep breath, Lyra stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the valley. As she did, she felt a strange sensation wash over her, as though the air itself had changed. The light of the lanterns grew brighter, their warmth seeping into her skin, filling her with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. But beneath that peace was something else, an undercurrent of anticipation, of something just out of reach. She could feel it, like a distant melody, drawing her deeper into the valley. and with each step, she felt herself growing lighter, as though the burdens she had carried for so long were slowly being lifted. The path wound its way through the valley, leading her past streams of light and fields of glowing flowers. The lanterns hovered close, their soft glow illuminating her way. They seemed almost alive, bobbing gently in the air, as though they were watching her, waiting for her to reach the heart of the valley. As she walked, Lyra couldn't help but think of the stories her grandmother used to tell her. Stories of magic and wonder, of places where dreams came true, and where one could find their true self. The valley felt like one of those stories, a place out of time, where the impossible became possible. But as the path grew steeper, the light of the lanterns began to change. It grew dimmer, the warm glow fading into a cooler, more subdued light. The shadows grew longer, and the air grew heavy, as though the valley itself was holding its breath. Lyra's steps slowed as she approached the center of the valley, her heart pounding in her chest. The lanterns clustered more closely together here, their light casting strange, flickering patterns on the ground. In the center of the clearing stood a single lantern, larger than the others, its light pulsating softly like a heartbeat. The guardian was waiting for her, standing beside the lantern. He raised his hand, and the other lanterns slowly floated away, leaving them alone in the clearing. "This is the lantern of truth," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It will show you what you seek, but be warned, what you see may not be what you expect." Lyra swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she stepped forward. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the culmination of her journey, the answer to all her questions. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the lantern. As she did, a burst of light erupted from within, blinding her for a moment. When the light faded, she found herself standing in a vast, empty space, the valley and the guardian nowhere to be seen. In the distance, she saw a figure, herself but different. This Lyra was younger, full of life and energy, her eyes bright with hope. She was standing in front of an easel, painting with a passion that Lyra hadn't felt in years. The colors on the canvas were vibrant, alive with emotion, each stroke a testament to the joy she once found in her art. But as Lyra watched, the scene began to change. The colors dulled, the brushstrokes grew hesitant, and the figure's expression shifted from joy to frustration, then to despair. The painting, once a masterpiece in the making, became a chaotic mess of smeared colors and broken lines. Lyra felt a lump form in her throat as she watched herself destroy the very thing she loved most. The younger Lyra threw the brush to the ground, tears streaming down her face, and walked away from the easel, leaving the canvas unfinished. The scene shifted again, showing Lyra's life in a series of fragmented images. Her failures, her regrets, the moments when she gave up on her dreams. Each image was a reminder of the pain she had carried with her, the weight of her unfulfilled potential. But then the images began to change. They showed her small victories, the times when she had pushed through the darkness, the moments of joy she had forgotten. They showed her the people who had believed in her, the love she had received, the beauty she had created, even in the midst of her struggles. The final image was of Lyra herself, standing in the valley, holding a lantern of her own. The light of the lantern was bright, unwavering, a beacon of hope in the darkness. As the image faded, Lyra found herself back in the clearing, the lantern of truth glowing softly in front of her. The guardian was watching her, his expression unreadable. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. Lyra took a deep breath, her heart full of emotion. "I saw myself," she replied, her voice trembling. "I saw the person I used to be, the person I lost, and the person I can still become." The guardian nodded slowly. "The valley has shown you the truth, Lyra. The light of the lanterns reflects what is within you. Your fears, your hopes, your dreams. It is up to you to decide what you will do with that truth." Lyra looked down at her hands, the memory of the lantern's light still fresh in her mind. She felt a sense of clarity, of purpose, that she hadn't felt in years. The valley had given her a gift, the gift of seeing herself as she truly was, and the chance to reclaim the life she had once dreamed of. "I know what I need to do," she said, her voice steady. "I need to go back. I need to finish what I started." The guardian's expression softened, and he stepped aside, allowing her to leave the clearing. "Go, Lyra. The valley will always be here, but your life awaits you beyond its borders." Lyra nodded, her heart full of gratitude. She turned and began the journey back through the valley, the light of the lanterns guiding her way. As she walked, she felt a sense of peace settle over her, a quiet confidence that she hadn't felt in a long time. The path led her back to the edge of the valley, where she had first entered. She paused for a moment, looking back at the valley, at the lanterns that floated like stars in the sky. She knew she would never forget this place, but she also knew that it was time to move forward. With a deep breath, she stepped out of the valley, leaving it behind as she began the next chapter of her life. Chapter 2. The Return. Lyra's footsteps echoed softly as she made her way down the mountain path, the memory of the Valley of the Lanterns still vivid in her mind. The lantern's glow had left an indelible mark on her heart, a warmth that persisted even as she descended into the familiar world she had left behind. But now, everything seemed different, brighter, clearer, as though the valley had opened her eyes to a new way of seeing. As she walked, the landscape gradually shifted from the ethereal beauty of the valley to the rugged, earthy tones of the world she knew. The air grew cooler, the scent of jasmine replaced by the familiar aroma of pine and earth. The path was steep, but Lyra's steps were sure, her resolve unwavering. She was returning not as the weary, disillusioned woman who had set out weeks before, but as someone reborn, someone who had faced the truth and emerged stronger. By the time Lyra reached the outskirts of her hometown, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the fields and houses. The sight of the small, sleepy town filled her with a mixture of nostalgia and determination. This was the place where her dreams had been born, and now it was where they would be realized. As she walked through the familiar streets, she noticed how little had changed. The same cobblestone paths, the same quaint houses with their flower-filled windowsills, the same old oak tree standing proudly in the town square. Yet, everything felt different to her now, more alive, more meaningful. It was as though the Valley of the Lanterns had infused the world with a new vibrancy, one that only she could see. She paused in front of her grandmother's house, the place where her journey had begun. The old, weathered structure stood like a sentinel, guarding the memories of her childhood. The attic, where she had found the map, seemed to call out to her, a reminder of the stories that had once filled her imagination. But Lyra wasn't here for memories. She was here to forge a new path. Taking a deep breath, she continued on to her small apartment on the edge of town. The building was unassuming, its exterior plain and unremarkable. But as she stepped inside, Lyra felt a surge of energy. The room was just as she had left it, her unfinished canvas standing in the corner, the colors faded and dusty, the brushes still lying where she had abandoned them. But now the sight didn't fill her with despair. Instead, it ignited a fire within her. She set her pack down and walked over to the canvas, running her fingers over the rough texture. The image was incomplete, a half-formed vision of something beautiful, something that had once been so clear in her mind. But now, as she looked at it, she could see the potential, the beauty that was waiting to be brought to life. Lyra picked up a brush, feeling its familiar weight in her hand. The hesitation she had once felt was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. The valley had shown her the truth of who she was, of what she was capable of, and now it was time to bring that truth to the world. She dipped the brush into a pot of paint, the vibrant colors leaping to life with each stroke. The canvas began to transform before her eyes, the shapes and lines coming together in a harmony that she hadn't felt in years. The doubts that had plagued her, the fear of failure that had held her back, All seemed to melt away as she lost herself in the act of creation. Hours passed, the sun set, and the room was bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. But Lyra didn't stop. She painted with a passion that she hadn't felt since she was a young girl, the brush moving with a life of its own. The canvas came alive under her hands, the colors vibrant and full of emotion, each stroke a reflection of the journey she had taken. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the window, Lyra stepped back to admire her work. The painting was unlike anything she had ever created. A masterpiece that captured the essence of the Valley of the Lanterns, the beauty of the lanterns themselves, the rivers of light, the fields of glowing flowers. But more than that, it captured her own journey, her struggle, her pain, and her ultimate triumph. She felt a sense of peace as she looked at the finished painting, a deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had finally found her voice again. The valley had shown her the way, but it was she who had walked the path, who had faced her fears and emerged victorious. As she stood there, the first rays of the sun illuminating her creation, Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. The Valley of the Lanterns had given her more than just inspiration. It had given her the strength to pursue her dreams, to believe in herself once more. And with that strength, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. With a renewed sense of purpose, Lyra set about preparing for the next chapter of her life. She contacted old friends, reached out to galleries, and began to share her story. The world may have forgotten her, but she was ready to remind it of who she was, and more importantly, who she had become. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra's work began to gain attention. Her paintings, infused with the light and magic of the valley, resonated with people in ways she hadn't expected. The small gallery in town offered to display her work, and soon word spread. People came from miles around to see the artist who had returned from obscurity, her art a beacon of hope and inspiration. But Lyra knew that her journey was far from over. The Valley of the Lanterns had given her a gift, and she was determined to share it with the world. Her paintings were just the beginning. She had stories to tell, stories of light and darkness, of hope and despair, stories that would touch the hearts of those who had lost their way. And so, with the memory of the valley always in her heart, Lyra set out on a new journey, a journey of creation, of sharing the light she had found with the world. The Valley of the Lanterns had shown her the truth, and now it was her turn to illuminate the path for others. As she stood before her latest painting, a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and fear, but she also knew that as long as she remembered the light of the lanterns, she would never lose her way. The next chapter of her life was just beginning, and Lyra was ready to embrace it with open arms.